All right, folks, it's Friday, and that means another episode of Orbit. And this week, I'm joined once again by Smooth. Smooth,
Hello, all the peoples out there in the world.
beautiful as always. And this week, we're talking about 3D platformers. And we've got a pretty good reason to talk about them because this Friday, today, October 2nd, 2020, is when Crash 4 It's About Time releases. And that's kind of got me thinking. Now, me, I'm not a Crash fan. Smooth, you've been playing the Insane trilogy recently, I know. And both of us have been playing Super Mario 3D All Stars, and all of this has really just been great for me because 3D platformers were like a staple, when I was a kid. But it just seems like nowadays there seems to be like this resurgence of 3D platformers, and that's what we're here to talk about today. Is this sort of resurgence of 3D platformers? But in order to talk about that, we got to go back to the beginning of gaming, not the beginning of time, because that would be a long conversation. So we're gonna go back to the start of platformers, and that really starts, uh, honestly, with Nintendo. Uh, yeah, like because you think back to like the Atari. A lot of people sort of dub the Atari as like the origin of like gaming and like and just 2D games, but those Atari games were mostly just arcade uh arcade ports that were on lesser hardware so you could have an arcade experience at home. It wasn't really until and it's going to sound super cliche to say it, but it wasn't really until Mario came along and showed the world how it was done that the 2D side-scrolling action game really took off and became such a staple of the industry. We have, like the entire 80s and 90s, it was all 2D platformers and action platformers. And especially after the massive success of Super Mario Brothers, the original game, that really showed the world more or less how it's done. This is how you make a an action adventure game. Super Mario Brothers was it. From there, we got stuff like Alex Kidd. We got Sonic the Hedgehog. We got Donkey Kong Country, the Yoshi games. You name it, like tons of games. Like even stuff that you wouldn't expect, like Contra or things like Ninja Gaiden. I feel like a lot of those were really just all directly influenced by Super Mario Brothers and the massive success that it had, and the massive success that it had solidifying that formula of 2D side scrolling platformers. So they dominated for years and years and years until the PlayStation came out. And that completely changed everything. Um Smooth, did you said you didn't grow up with PlayStation, right? What systems did you grow up with?
Well, I was mainly, well, when I was a little kid, I mainly grew up with Nintendo, so like N64, GameCube, DS. I never got a Game Boy Advanced, but I
Mhm.
could play those games on the DS. But,
Yeah.
but I started branching out when I started playing uh the Xbox 360 with
Right.
with a couple of my friends, and that's when I got one of my own. And ever since then, I've mainly just been a Nintendo and Xbox person. I've never really tried PlayStation. It's not like, I hate it or anything. I just
Yeah, yeah.
never got around to play it.
Well, just I'm sure you know the history behind PlayStation and how it revolutionized the industry in terms of 3D games, of course, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, of course. But just to remind everybody at home, um, there really wasn't. The Nintendo 64 wasn't out yet. I think the Sega Saturn might have been on the market, but it didn't really do the job. Like the way that it should have. It was more of a 2D gaming powerhouse that was somewhat capable of 3D. And I think the Atari Jaguar was on the scene, but that thing's like kind of a joke nowadays. But really, the PlayStation and the architecture of the PlayStation is one of my favorite video game consoles of all time. I think that everything about it is just brilliant. The CDs that they used, the development architecture that they used, just so much of it was just like spot on, perfect and exactly what the industry needed to really propel it forward. Um, and 3D action platformers were the like 3D action adventure games and primarily platformers were the games that really showcased what 3D gaming could be. Um, Around the time in the 90s though, a lot of other games were showing off uh what would be the next major trend beyond 3D action adventure and 3D platformer games, which was first person shooters. But you see, on consoles, FPS games weren't really possible yet. We saw the Nintendo 64 was really kind of the only system that was able to do first person shooter games well. We saw stuff like Perfect Dark, GoldenEye, Turok, etc., etc. Even Doom 64, those were first person games that were able to do really well on N64 and really capture the essence of those games. But if you wanted to have a first person experience, it was primarily PC is where you would go. It wasn't like we'll talk about first person shooter games later on. For right now, the importance of 2D side scrolling games in solidifying and differentiating the home video game console to the arcade was just about the same as what 3D platformers meant in differentiating the past with the present, as it were in the late 90s when the PlayStation N64 hit the scene. You had, of course, Crash Bandicoot, we already talked about that, Spyro the Dragon. You had Super Mario 64, Banjo Kazooie, Donkey Kong 64, games like Medieval. The list goes on and on. Stuff like Ape Escape. It's just there were so many games, and 3D platformers were so important back then. And I think the reason why they were so popular back then was because, it was really the first time anybody had ever seen anything like that. And even into the PS2 era, we saw things like that. But I think that really with the what the PlayStation did beyond just solidifying 3D games was making sure was providing a platform for games to tell really immersive stories. And that's something that PlayStation had really been about, and that's something that PlayStation had really put to the forefront of its platform and what it represented for years. PS1, 2, and 3, and 4, even still to this day, in fact, I'd say it's really telling stories and giving immersive gameplay experiences. Uh, on PlayStation, you saw stuff like Metal Gear Solid and Final Fantasy VII, the which are the two major ones, which really I think kicked off that trend. And it's something that when you move into the PS2 era, the GameCube era, and I guess the original Xbox era, we really saw a lot more games that were similar to Final Fantasy VII, a lot more games that were similar to Metal Gear Solid. And 3D platformers started to they stayed around. Of course they stayed around, but we started to see them, I don't know, I guess being put in the limelight less and less. What's your impression of that, Smooth? I know that you spent I believe that was the sixth console generation. You spent that primarily on GameCube, right?
Yeah, it was mostly, yeah. I mostly just had GameCube for that
Yeah,
gen.
yeah, and GameCube, even Nintendo, with the GameCube, they and Nintendo's always, I feel like, always been kind of a step behind everybody else in terms of the trends. In some ways, they're trendsetters, but in a lot of ways, they just kind of hang back and do what they know best. Um, but even still, like when Nintendo, we saw, Mario was really like the only 3D platformer that they had in that era. Super Mario Sunshine, that was like the only 3D platformer that they put out that I can recall, right? I don't. There was nothing else. Yeah, that was it.
When it came when when it came from Nintendo, I believe so. Would
that
Metroid
that that was
Prime
it.
count?
No, Metroid Prime is a first-person shooter.
Oh yeah, but didn't it have like some platforming stuff in it too?
Well,
I know it's not a I
yeah,
know it's not a full blown platformer, but
yeah,
like
not
you know what I
not
mean.
this, not it's not the same thing though. But that reminds me though, there was, sort of that, and it's kind of interesting because it really is. I feel the way 3D platformers went away. I feel like it really was just because the technology kept moving forward. 2D platformers eventually started dwindling. You know, N64. I don't think the N64 really had any 2D platformers. I remember playing Yoshi's Story, and that was a 2D platformer, and then Kirby and the Crystal Shards was a 2.5D style platformer, but there was no real like 2D games, and I think it was probably mainly because the N64's engine I think it was mainly because the N64's engine was primarily designed to make 3D games. But even on the PlayStation, 3D games seemed to be the primary games there. You had some 2D stuff, like big massive names like Rayman and Symphony of the Night, to name a few. There's plenty more, but those were like the two major ones. But it seemed like the trend was definitely moving towards 3D platformers. And then going on from that, like I just said, first person shooters during that sixth console generation, uh, the Xbox proved that first person games could work on home console. Like I 100% say that without the Xbox, first person shooters and online multiplayer would not have gotten to where they are as quickly as they did without the Xbox. And that's just a fact of the industry right there. Um Microsoft's Xbox with its controller design, with the dual thumbstick layout, analog triggers, and integrating online play into the console itself, look no further than Halo 2. There's tons of other examples because games all over were getting online support. You had stuff like Star Wars Battlefront. Um, there were some of the old, like I think some of the old was it SOCOM? No, SOCOM was only on PlayStation. There was some game. I forget what it's called. I think it might have been SOCOM. I don't remember, but there were tons of them. I think like the Time Splitters games. I think they had online multiplayer. Some of the James Bond games of the era had online multiplayer. But the point is, Xbox really took that, and when we moved over to the 360 era, what all we saw was FPS games. Like that was like the
Yeah.
major like FPS games came and took it by storm. And in that era, the only 3D platformers worth note were Mario games. That was it. Like there were no other like I mean Mario and Ratchet and Clank was still around, but other than that, it was really just Mario. Mario was like the only like the last remaining platform. It was like they just everybody was making first person games. And one of my favorite things to talk about when I talk about this sort of the trends in gaming is I like to look at Naughty Dog, because Naughty Dog was such an interesting developer throughout this whole entire process. They created one of the first 3D platformers, Crash Bandicoot, one of the games that revolutionized the industry. And then they did it again with Jack and Daxter, using a lot of revolutionary technology and techniques in the creation of that game, allowing for a big, open, seamless world in that game, something that hadn't been seen before. And then Jack and Daxter got super edgy. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure why they did that, not gonna lie. Well, I guess that was mostly because, the trend was kind of switching
the
to,
trend,
FPS and,
yeah, the
you know,
trend was moving.
gun
Yeah, like
games.
like the trend was the trend was moving. The trend was changing. The world was changing, and like they decided to take Jack and Dexter in a different direction, where like now instead of it just being a collectathon game, it had like a whole narrative, like plot, and Jack had guns and like weapons, and it was like edgy and like dark. It was like rated T for teen, and before it was like rated E10, I think. It was like, whoa, it was like, what happened? And then directly following that, we got Uncharted. And I will say this: Uncharted is one of my favorite video game series of all time. I hold that series in such high regard. I love the story of Nathan Drake, 100%. That being said, though, side note: if you make an Uncharted 5, I will be very upset.
Mm.
Uncharted is over. You did 4 of them. The story's done. Let's move on. Do something new. Like just leave it. I don't even want you guys to touch it anymore because it's special right where it is.
I mean, yeah,
End of that. So
the fourth one was literally called a Thief's End. Like,
a thief's
end.
end.
And
Yes, and the ending of that game was beautiful. If you haven't played Uncharted, buy the Nathan Drake collection, buy Uncharted 4. You can even buy Lost Legacy because that's a pretty good game too. But just I have to fanboy over it. Every time I mention Uncharted, I have to talk about how much I love it because that game is just so amazing to me. But especially when you look at Uncharted, right? Uncharted PS3, and what was Sony's philosophy during the PS3? They wanted to make games that were like movies, games that were cinematic, and that was the industry wide trend, was sort of bridging the gap between cinematic storytelling and gaming. And I think they did a pretty damn good job. You know, for just for me, I think they did a really damn good job. There were tons of games that did that extremely well. Look no further than BioShock. Look at Gears of War. Look at Uncharted. Just the list can go on and on and on. And I think, when it comes to that trend, where did 3D platformers fit into that?
yeah, they just
Except if you're Mario.
yeah, they really just disappeared aside from like Mario and technically Sonic. But
Oh, yeah,
other
Sonic
than
was there
that,
too. I forgot
uh,
about him.
yeah, it was it was really like Mario, Sonic, Ratchet and Clank, and
And then there was
that
that
was like
failed Crash Bandicoot reboots that like they crashed and burned. Pun intended, I guess.
yeah, that one was more of like a beat 'em up than a platformer, but it did have some platforming elements, but that was more of a beat 'em up game
Yeah. Um
for some reason.
and then Spyro just kind of like, again, Spyro went for the whole there's another thing, Spyro, massive open world 3D platformer, completely flipped the script with the Legend of Spyro series, a series that I personally enjoy. It's got some mixed feelings from the general public, but I personally like Legend of Spyro. I thought it was pretty cool. But like that changed. Even Spyro the Dragon made the switch to being a cinematic story. They had Elijah Wood play Spyro the Dragon. Elijah Wood played Spyro the Dragon. But like, the trend really just, everybody was moving away from 3D platformers. They were moving towards more cinematic, more story-driven games because I guess the needs of gamers and the wants of gamers, the desires of gamers and desires of, I guess, the public, because gaming was becoming bigger and bigger. And I guess what everybody wanted was changing. And
Yeah, like
yeah.
with like 3D platformers and all that, like back, in the late and 2000s, all that. When it first started, with Mario 64, as you said, everybody's seen how popular that game was, and they're all like, we want a piece of that cake. We want a slice of it. So
Yeah.
there's all these companies making
Mm-hmm.
all these platformers, but and the thing with
So you think it's
platformers is that
oversaturation?
yeah, that's that I was that's what I was gonna say. Uh, it was pretty much like well, one thing was like with platformers, companies can like show their creativity and everything with that kind of game, but because there were so many of them, people were kind of like getting tired of the same old thing, and then when like the first FPS thing got super popular and that sold well, then everybody jumped on that, and that kind of stayed for a very long time, and now we're
Because
in
FPSs are awesome
yeah,
and people like shooting things.
and now
People
we're in
like
this day
me.
and age, and now we're in this day and age where it's kind of like a mix of both, because
Yeah.
like platformers are like somewhat coming back, but I
They're
guess that
coming
that'll be a
back.
topic to talk about later or now. I don't
Yeah,
know.
they're coming back. And this is something that I observed in the 360 era. 2D games seem to be having a lot of nostalgia. There seem to be a lot of nostalgia and a lot of reboots and like comebacks for 2D games. We saw Mega Man 9 and 10. We saw Sonic the Hedgehog Episode 4, New Super Mario Brothers, you know?
Yeah,
Um
there was like Rayman Origins as well,
Rayman
but
Origins, yes.
there was a good
And
amount.
Rayman went 3D a while ago. Like his second and third games were 3D, I think.
Yeah, the second game was on like and what six? I mean, shoot, the second game's on everything anymore.
Yeah.
But it was like it originated back on like N64,
Yeah.
and I think it was like another system, but it was like titled differently. I don't exactly remember, but I know the third game
But
was also 3D, and then there was the
yeah.
canceled fourth one, and then he just kind of went dormant, and then 2D game came back with it.
So really for me, uh I think that this whole that whole thing in 360 era where we just saw a lot of nostalgia, a lot of throwback to 2D games, and we still see that nowadays. A lot of indie developers are still making games that harken back to stuff. Look at Bloodstained, etc. Whatever.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
but now, what the heck happened? Who opened the 3D platforming floodgates? Who opened the 3D platformer floodgates? We've got well, Super Mario Odyssey is a given. We were going to get that, no matter what.
yeah,
Nintendo will always do whatever they want, so that's a given. So Mario doesn't even count because he's always been a 3D platformer. I'd say the same thing for Sonic. He's always those are characters that have always been here. They've stuck around. But Crash Bandicoot came back. Spyro and Crash came back in fully remastered trilogies, right?
yeah,
Uh, Crash just got a fourth game. We got Yooka-Laylee, which is a spiritual successor to Banjo and Kazooie, right? We've got what is it called? Balan Wonderworld, I believe,
yeah.
right?
That one's coming out. It's
Yeah, Balan
either
Wonderworld.
end of this year or something like that. I'd have to
I
look
think I
again.
think it's launching with the new console, maybe. I don't know. And we've got shoot, it was just in my head. Psychonauts 2. Psychonauts 2 is here. What's going on? What's up with the 3D? What's up with the 3D love all of a sudden? It seems like these games are coming back in full force. We even got a massive reboot recently of Ratchet and Clank. And Ratchet and Clank is another series that's been around for like a long time, but that was a series that kind of was laying dormant for a while and just kind of just came back. I
Yeah,
mean, I don't like, but still, Ratchet and Clank's been around, but and we even got Knack for what it's worth.
we got freaking Bubsy.
For what is it? Yeah, Bubsy came back. What the hell? I completely
So
forgot about
random.
that. Bubsy came back, and I'm like, why is Bubsy like, what is happening right now? And this moves on into the next topic: is are we entering an era of late '90s to early 2000s nostalgia? You know,
I
I
would
feel like
definitely say yes to
yeah,
that.
yeah, like I think that what's happening now is that people are getting really nostalgic for stuff like Crash. They're remembering stuff like Bubsy, even though it was crappy back then.
Mhm.
Look, we could bring it back and make some money off.
I mean,
you
shoot,
know, like
we had Battle for Bikini Bottom
Battle for Bikini
remade and
Bottom too.
everything.
See, this is why you're here to remind me of these things. Battle for Bikini Bottom got a remaster, and I was like, okay, what's going on? You know what I mean? That got a remaster, and it's just shocking to me. And even Blinks the Time Sweeper got a remaster. That was an original Xbox platformer that got
Really?
a remastered port. Yes, that got a remastered port on Xbox One. And I think it's also on PC. Never played it
Oh
myself,
wow.
but I just remember seeing that, and I was like, what is going on? But I think it's just nostalgia. I think nostalgia's taking over. I mean, like, look at that. We got Tony Hawk Pro Skater 1 and 2 back on consoles again, HD remaster, which is awesome. And
Oh
it's kind of makes me think of something my friend always says. He always says a broke clock is right twice a day. And that's how I feel about Activision, where it's like most of the stuff they do is shitty, but every now and then,
yeah.
every once in a while, like they got to get something right, and
Yeah, but the thing
those
the,
two
the
times a
thing
day were
with
Crash and Tony Hawk. Yeah.
but the thing with the 3D platformers like in this day and age is like it's kind of like half and half with some of them being original products and then some of
Mm-hmm.
them and then half of them being mostly remakes and
Yeah.
remasters, all that stuff. Like Ty the
Remakes, remasters,
Tasmanian
reboots.
Tiger got a remaster,
Oh
all
yes,
that
I forgot
stuff.
all about that. Yeah.
Freaking Medieval got a remake and all that.
Yes.
Like
Um,
it's like half
and
and half.
to speak more about the '90s and early 2000s nostalgia, Final Fantasy VII got a remake. You know,
That's
uh,
true
that
too.
that got remade. Um, but I think the biggest question, really, like it's very evident, right? It's very clear now that these games are here, that the comeback has happened, at least in some way. But the question is, will they once more become a staple of the industry? Are they here to stay, or are they just a passing phase that these companies are just throwing out old school games to capture nostalgia again? Um, what do you think about that?
I would say that they probably will be here to stay, and this isn't even just like with Nintendo or anything. Like, uh, Activision didn't have to have Toys for Bob make a Crash 4, but they did. Like,
No, Activision did because they saw money.
well, yeah, but but they know that these
Yeah,
are starting to sell super
I get
well
what you mean,
again,
though. Yeah,
and yeah, and I mean we will potentially see maybe a new Spyro. Who knows?
I'd assume a new Spyro's right after Crash. I'd assume.
It'd be pretty cool if that did
You know what
happen.
I'd love to see? Uh, no, we'll talk about that
Uh,
later. Uh, let's stick to
but
the task at hand, right? Let's stick to the task at hand. Go ahead.
but yeah, I could potentially seeing them stay in the market for right now because like we're getting like original products coming out like Balan Wonderworld or Balan Wonderland, whichever one it's called. Uh,
I think
we
it's
had
Wonderworld.
what's up?
Doesn't matter.
Oh,
Doesn't matter.
we had Super Lucky's Tale, and then
Oh my
new
gosh, how did I
Super
forget
Lucky's
about that?
Tale.
Yeah, that was another one. Super Lucky's Tale. Completely out of nowhere. Fun game. Nice platformer. Don't forget Psychonauts
And
2.
Psychonauts 2, that is true.
Mm-hmm.
We had the Insane trilogy, we had the Reignited trilogy with Spyro. We're getting a new Crash game, which is coming out
I want to say
Friday.
this right. Yeah, well, at the time of this video being recorded,
Oh yeah,
it's out
today.
today. Yeah, that's today. That's now. Um, yeah. So it really is. It's weird, and I know like this probably doesn't matter. It doesn't mean anything, but Mario 3D All Stars is a thing now, and
Hmm.
that that uh that's pretty awesome. Um, but really, what stands out to me about this entire situation is just the seemingly the success of these games, right? Seemingly the
Yeah,
success that these games have seen, you know? And it makes me wonder, are developers going to be seeing like, hey, these games still have potential. Hey, there's still a market for these kinds of games. We can make games like this and put them out and people will still buy them because you got to think, the 3D platformers people like them. Like people line up every time a new Mario game comes out. People line up, kids and adults line up to play the new Mario. Same
hey,
thing for
how's it going?
Sonic, but yeah, how's it go, dude? You should have seen me. I had my Cappy hat. I bought the Amiibo triple pack. I was fully decked out for Super Mario uh Odyssey. Like, dude, like I had Jump Up Superstar blasting in my ears like on my way home. I was like, yo, I'm ready for this. I was ready. I was absolutely ready. I was absolutely 100% ready for that. Um,
And then Nintendo blew us away with the game.
and then Nintendo blew my socks off. Actually, like they blew my socks off, and then they flew into the future, and they landed on my future self,
Oh,
and they got blown off again. It was pretty crazy.
nice, nice.
It was very nice. Yeah, I liked it. I liked it. Um, Gosh, I'm such a weirdo. But really, I wonder will these developers will they really sit here and be like, hey, people are still buying these. Maybe there's still a market for it because like I said, people still buy Sonic, people still buy Mario, people still buy Ratchet. I feel like I think the developers. I don't know if they've moved away from 3D platformers because just industry trends. Maybe they just see more money elsewhere. Maybe just the visions and the projects that they want to make are different now, or like I don't know because it really is hard to say when it comes to uh, an artistic medium like video game creation because you can say in a lot of ways that gameplay styles of games are dictated by industry trends. No greater example than Battle Royale right now, where everybody and their grandmom has
Yeah.
a Battle Royale game now. And, you can tell that those are games that they're made to be fun and they're made for people to enjoy, but those are not necessarily artistic endeavors, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Um, and I guess, the same thing probably, could have been said about a lot of 3D platformers back in the day. Those games were made to make money and they weren't necessarily artistic endeavors. Not to discredit any of the artists that work on any games, there's tons of talented people that work on games. But it's just, I feel like when those projects were greenlit, they were greenlit with the intention of, hey, this is a premise that we can use for a 3D platformer. They're what's hot right now. Let's cash out, you know? Uh, and not to question, like, again,
Yeah,
not
I
to
mean,
question the integrity of the developers.
yeah, and Platonic Games,
Mm-hmm.
who made ukulele and everything, like that started as a Kickstarter to see like how popular, you know, like how nostalgic and how popular like 3D platformers still are, and that was back in like, well, I think the Kickstarter started in like 2014 or 2015. I know the game came out in like 2015, but I don't exactly know when the Kickstarter began, but like that Kickstarter blew like all the goals out of the way, like super fast, and that showed people were wanting these games back.
Um, yeah. And the same thing can be said for Mighty Number Nine.
Mm, that's
and
a
then
story for
and
another
then
day.
Capcom says, "Hold my beer." And then Capcom's like, "Nice try, guys."
That's a story for another day.
Like, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. Yeah, Mighty Number. I don't even
I
think it was a bad game, but Mega Man 11 like just completely took a shit on that game. Like not like just completely.
I
Like it just
honestly forgot that game existed.
most people have by now. Most people have.
But
And this, ladies and gentlemen, is a cautionary tale in Kickstarter backing.
mhm.
Yes, it is. Um whew. That's funny. But just you gotta just give a little chuckle for that one. Pour one out for Mighty Number Nine. But yeah, Kickstarter is also a thing that has allowed several games to happen. Several indie games have been backed by Kickstarter. Ukulele and Mighty Number Nine are two of the major ones, but a lot of reboot projects and reimaginings have been backed by Kickstarter by fans who still demand these games. And you can see the amount of fans who are looking for titles like this. And maybe this is my Xbox fan showing, but I think that Game Pass is going to be an excellent vessel for the 3D platformer genre because you see how Game Pass is already an excellent vessel for indie games.
That is true. Like I mean, there are a good amount that are on there of what I know of, and I know a good amount of indie games are also like on the Switch eShop and everything,
Yeah.
and they get noticed that way as well.
Yeah, I think Nintendo's ecosystem and Nintendo's player base loves indies for one. Um
Yeah,
Indies are great on the go games, period. So that's why, 3DS and Switch, great ecosystems for indie games. But uh, there's so many games on Game Pass. And, like we always joke, right, that I should be the Xbox spokesperson because I'm always advocating for Game Pass. But that's because it's so good. There's so many indie games on Game Pass, and there's so many games that I otherwise would have never tried if it hadn't been for Game Pass.
yeah.
You know, stuff like played a game, The Turing Test, What Remains of Edith Finch, this game called Tacoma. Those are like all real story based games. But I also played. Well, I bought a copy of Super Lucky's Tale, but I know that you're playing Super Lucky's Tale now, and I know another friend of mine played it recently because it's on Game Pass. It's like, hey, it's a 3D platformer. That'll be fun. Kill some time. It's on Game Pass, and it's a perfectly fine, fun game. I'm playing this game right now called The Tourist. That's another indie game, and you know, like that's just the beauty of Game Pass. Stuff like Dead Cells, Bloodstained, which you know what? Let me stop. Let me stop. What am I doing? What am I doing? What am I doing? Let me stop. I need to stop because
This must be about
once I
xenophobia.
start once I start talking about Game Pass, dude, like I don't stop because it's so good and I love it for indies and I think that it will be an amazing vehicle for 3D platforming games. By the way, Banjo-Kazooie is on Game Pass. Banjo-Kazooie, the classics, the one and onlys on Game Pass. Get Game Pass, people.
The one
It's
and
great.
only.
Get Game Pass. Get it. Just get Game Pass. Like it's so good. It's whew, calm down, calm down, calm down. Anyways,
This
uh,
podcast is sponsored by Game Pass.
this podcast is not sponsored by Xbox nor Game Pass. We're not affiliated, but but that's not to say that we wouldn't want to be, right? Um, I think that with the way the world is now, it's the perfect time for 3D platformers to come back. I think that we are in an era where smaller games like this can come back. You know, like smaller projects like these can come back. You can make a cute little 3D platformer or even a big, ambitious 3D platformer, the likes of Crash Bandicoot. I think the time is now. I
Oh
think
yeah,
it is.
easily.
You've got stuff like
People
Game
are getting
Pass. You've got Kickstarter. You've got Twitch so people can play like and YouTube, which are just free publicity for your games. You know,
yeah, and people are like, and there's tons of people that are getting like nostalgic for these, for the 3D platformers that they
the
grew up
nostalgia
with.
is starting. You know, I've been
And
feeling a lot of uh
I,
oh what were you gonna say?
I was gonna say
Say
like
what?
one big example of that was all 3D All Stars, cause oh boy.
I have never seen $60 fly out of my wallet so fast.
And the thing
Like
is, I know people say like they should have done
that they're
more.
lazy ports. Yeah, they should have done more.
Yes, but granted, you're getting these three games that are pretty much not really overpriced, but more than they should be anymore. Like I went into my local game store and I saw that they had Sunshine for like 75 bucks. You'd be paying more for one copy of Sunshine, whereas you could pay 60 for three full 3D platformers right there on one
And
cartridge.
I will say this because I know that people are probably going to be saying this. Well, I could just get Dolphin Emulator and get it for free. Uh, yeah, but that's piracy. So, but that's
Well, and
piracy. So,
also the fact that apparently the port of Sunshine that's on Switch is off of that emulator. So if you didn't like it on there, then ooh, tough luck there, bud.
is it really that Switch port is using Dolphin?
That's what I heard.
I don't think that's true. I'm sure Nintendo has their own in-house emulation software. I don't think Nintendo would have to use Dolphin. I mean, like they own the source code for GameCube and Wii. You know,
Well,
they don't
yeah.
need Dolphin. Anyways, moot point. Point is, piracy is not a legitimate option, and not everybody feels comfortable illegally downloading ROMs of games and playing them that way as opposed to buying them. Not everybody knows how to do that. Not everybody, you know, like not everybody's equipped to do that, you know? Um but if you wanted to play Super Mario Sunshine, now is your chance. The only thing that confuses me about this, and we talked about this in the episode we did a while back where we discussed whatchamacallit, what is it? A while back,
Uh-oh.
Super Mario, we were discussing 3D All Stars. Jesus Christ, what's going on? When we
Yeah.
were discussing 3D All Stars, we talked about how it's weird that these are like seemingly like a timed launch or a timed release game where like after a while they're gonna go back in the Disney vault or whatever. Uh, and I hope that doesn't become a trend with Nintendo because that's gonna take a lot of my money away. Uh, that's gonna be a lot of my money coming out of my pocket, and I don't need that in my life. But yeah, this is such a great way for this is such a gateway drug to Mario, especially with the massive success of Odyssey. These are like, you know what? I can't even talk about it. We did an episode on Mario 3D All Stars. Go check that out if you want to. good discussion there, but we're not going to talk about it here because I could go on and on about that game, on and on about it. But you know what? Um, I think that we've essentially touched on everything that we really can touch on. So to close out today's episode, let's talk about which 3D platforming series do you want to see come back? If you could take any 3D platforming series, you can pick multiple, but if you could take, and this is a question for you folks at home too, if you want to comment, what 3D platformers would you guys want to see right back, coming back and making a comeback with either an HD remaster or just a sequel? Smooth, what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, you already know what mine would be, but
Banjo.
but
Yeah.
but yeah, I feel like we're in the golden age of companies wanting to take these old games and like remake them or remaster them, whichever one they want to do, or make them from the ground up, reimagine them, whatever. Do whatever you want. They're yours. Uh, but like we're in the golden age of that to where like nostalgia is hitting everybody really hard when it comes to 3D platformers. Like that grew up with those old games like Crash, Spyro, like Mario 64, like even like Sonic Adventure or that kind of stuff, like Jack and Daxter, Ratchet and Clank, all of them. I can see like companies can easily make a good buck off of doing these, like either remaking games, making sequels. Like shoot, I'm surprised PlayStation hasn't told Sanzaru Games to make a Sly 5 at this point because of the freaking revamp of these platformers.
I 100% agree. I think Sly should definitely come back. Uh,
Especially since it's on a cliffhanger.
One 3D platformer that I would love to come back, and this is going to be kind of an obscure one. Shout outs to anybody who is familiar with this, who grew up with this. Freaking Pac Man World, please, for the love of God. I loved Pac Man World when I was a kid. Pac Man World and Pac Man World 2. Oh my God. Those were my games back then. I loved them so much. They were so fun. Um, and I'm a huge fan of Pac Man. I love playing Pac Man. I'm not very good at Pac Man, but I just love playing it. I love all forms of Pac Man. The classic Pac Man, Miss Pac Man, Pac Man Championship Edition, Deluxe 1 and 2. I also love Pac Man 256. It's just it's so good. It's such a good game. Such a good game. I have a great time playing Pac Man. I really do. And I would love for Pac Man World to come back because Pac Man World was just such a weird thing to me. It's like, okay, everybody's getting a 3D platformer, even Pac-Man.
I mean, shoot, Frogger has had
Frogger, oh yeah, Frogger did have some. We don't gotta talk about those.
Frogger
I
actually
think
had a good
Pac-Man.
Frogger had a good amount.
You know what was weird? Speaking of Pac-Man, there was that Pac-Man and the Ghostly Adventures thing.
Yeah.
Remember that? Like, what was up with that? Where that was like so out of nowhere. It was like a TV show, right? It was
It
like a
was
kids
it
TV
was a
show and a
yeah, it was a
video
TV
game.
show that ran on like Disney XD, and
Yeah.
it had two games
Why is it
and I
that when
think like
I
two seasons or something.
hold on a second, Smooth.
Oh no.
This is just funny, right? So I searched up Pac-Man and the Ghostly Adventures, right? The first thing I see pop up is Pinky, and of course, Pinky's kind of like a kind of sexy looking ghost, and I feel like that's just the reason why she was the first search result because the internet is weird like that. I'm not saying I think
Oh,
she's sexy, but like her design is more like a curvy female ghost character. Let me just clarify. I'm not saying that I
please,
think this
please.
cartoon ghost is sexually attractive at all.
I
Let's move on.
understand.
So
Please.
let's move on. Let's move
This is about
on.
platformers, sir.
Let's move on. Oh boy.
But like
Um,
those games were platformers from what I know of, but
I've
that
never
was like
seen anything about it before.
but uh those games were like the last known platforming thing when it came to Pac-Man, and that was back in like shoot like 2013, 2014, something like that.
Yeah, the Ghostly
So
Adventures,
it's
and it
been a
did the
good
Ghostly
while.
Adventures 2. So it's been a while for Pac-Man. And before that, the last
I,
game that come out was Pac-Man World 3, I think on PS2.
yeah, there was a third one. I wouldn't mind that coming back.
Pac-Man World or Ghostly Adventures?
Pac-Man World.
Hmm. Yeah, I loved Pac-Man World. I had such a great time with it, you know? It was such a fun game for me.
Just to clarify, this is like a really long closing. Just just say,
Well, it's the closing topic, not the closing
I know.
statement, you know?
But like,
This
yeah,
is like a warm up.
my series of choice is always be like Banjo. I know it won't happen, but it would be
It
awesome
might happen.
if it did. With the person who runs Rare, no, it won't.
Hey, Rare might throw us a curveball one day. You never know. Um, I know if Josh was here, he'd probably say Sonic Adventure. Maybe, maybe.
Probably, yeah.
But I don't think there's any other 3D platformer that like I want to come back as badly as Pac-Man World. Uh, just because it was just fun. I liked Pac-Man. It had like such an interesting mechanic. You know, it was just cool. I love Pac-Man's design. You know, it's just great times.
I mean, yeah,
Just great times.
that design is used in Smash Brothers too, and
Yeah, like you
it
know,
fits them perfectly.
it fits him perfectly. The little eyeballs and the mouth, like, oh, he's just great. I love you, Pac Man. I love Pac Man. He's great.
This is now turned into a Pac-Man podcast. Let's go.
Dude, I would talk about Pac Man all day long, dude. There's so many different versions of Pac Man. Like, just incredible stuff. I love Pac Man. Pac Man is my man. It's my pack. You know, that's weird. Let's just end the stream. Let's just end the episode. Let us know what you guys think about this whole 3D platformer thing. Is it a fad? Do you think it's like just a passing fad? Is it just people cashing in on nostalgia, or are 3D platformers really back for good? I certainly hope so. Um, Also, how much do you love Pac-Man? I bet it's not more than me. So next. Oh boy, but yep. Uh, yeah. I hope everybody enjoyed this week. We'll be back next week with more Orbit, of course. Not sure what the topic's going to be. But you know, I never am, so whatever.
We never really
Everybody, yeah,
last minute.
I came up with this topic like yesterday. So so we'll see. Everybody at home, stay safe, take care, and enjoy Crash Bandicoot if you got it. Also, Steve from Minecraft is in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. That is all.
Minecraft for
Minecraft
Smash. Yes.
for Smash. Pac-Man for Smash. He's already there.
He's been in
But
there for 2 games.
I know, it's awesome. I was so happy when he got. You know, let's stop because once I start talking about Pac-Man, we're gonna go for another 20 minutes. All right, folks. We'll see you next week.
Adios.